Hey everybody, thanks for joining SpringPath, the podcast. We have a great show lined up, lots to talk about, so let's get after it. Hey everybody, thanks for joining another episode of SpringPath, the podcast. We've got an interesting episode here, which is really exciting. We have guest Todd St Vrain joining us. He's actually from San Francisco right now, but he's representing Melbourne, Australia, and the University of Melbourne. Todd, thanks for joining us.
Good day. Great to be with you, Mike.
All right. So you and I were just joking at my inability to say the name correctly. My whole life, I thought it was Melbourne, but it's actually, if I wanted to be Australian and seem like I fit in, how do you pronounce it?
Melbourne. The R is silent. So it's the University of Melbourne in the city of Melbourne.
Awesome. So that was news to me, and it may help some of our listeners. So Todd, why don't we start with a little bit about this city? Because I hear it's an amazing city, and then we'd love to hear about how you got into this role, because you're originally from the stateside.
Yes, I grew up in St. Louis, Missouri, and I did some graduate studies in Australia, and I wound up living in Australia for 15 years and becoming a dual citizen. And it was only the pull of being, wanting to be closer to family in St. Louis that brought me back. Melbourne is a fantastic city. Everyone knows Sydney because of the Opera House. Melbourne has been voted the most livable city in the world 7 times. And it's really a city of coffee, food. The weather can be 4 times in a day, so it's all focused about things that you do well inside. Shopping, sports is really big in Melbourne as well. And the University of Melbourne is located the main campus is right in the heart of the city. So you've got great to all of the excellent academics, easy access to this fantastic city.
Yeah, and from what I understand and what I've read and researched, the city itself is extremely safe. So right where the campus is, it's like it's not typically like and I don't mean this in a negative way, but like a New York or a Los Angeles, in the sense that it's more prestigious and more pristine in the way that things are kept up.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I was just in Melbourne for the first time in 3 years at the university, and the downtown, which again, you have to learn to speak Australian, we call the CBD, which is short for Central Business District, is thriving, with people shopping, eating, living there. So the university is only about 10 minutes from downtown, but you're actually in a quiet residential neighborhood. We've got the biomedical precinct on one side of the campus, but then the other, you spill a few blocks over to Lygon Street, which is our version of Little Italy, where you can have really good coffee and gelato and pizza. It is I think you have to take precautions in any big city, but I think the quality of life in Australian cities are very safe and very diverse. It's a country of immigrants, but I think also very welcoming, to people from different backgrounds.
No, exactly. And I think, this kind of segueing into the campus life and the university itself. Now you have people from all over the world joining. And one of the key things that I've heard mentioned time and time again is, it's like the Australian version of an Ivy League school in the campus. Can you kind of elaborate on that?
Sure. So the University of Melbourne was established in 1853, making it the second oldest university in Australia. And we are part of the group of 8. So there are 8 research-intensive universities in Australia. So that is kind of an Australian version of an Ivy League. We're very large. We have, nearly 60,000 students both at the undergraduate and graduate level. And like most Australian universities, public and very comprehensive. So I also like to say that we're an Australian version of a UC Berkeley, which is one of our partner institutions. And when I mean a partner institution, we do partner with the Ivy Leagues, with UC Berkeley, with many of the top universities and colleges in the United States, whether that's research partnership, but there's also partnerships for student exchange. And so I think it's a good guide just to talk about the the academic rigor and excellence that you're going to find as you would at some of the top schools in the U.S.
Now, exactly. So one of the things you and I have talked about, and I've heard you use this phrase time and time again when talking about the university, is you said excellence, but it's affordable access to excellence. That was one of the key things. And with you being an Australian school system for higher education, you can actually get the degree in 3 years versus the typical U.S. structure for a 4-year degree.
That's correct. So in Australia, a 3-year degree is standard. That's also very common in most UK and Irish universities. So I guess it shows the legacy, of that. So 3-year degree is standard. So that's a savings in itself. The tuition is based actually on the classes that you enroll in the degree. But I would say probably on average 45,000 Australian dollars. The exchange rate, the US dollar, it works to your favor. It's very strong at the moment. So yeah, more or less that comes out to about 32,000 US dollars, which I think is an excellent value considering, the caliber of the university.
Sure. No, 100%. Yeah, I think, and so along those lines, I mean, some of the things you and I have talked about, that's information that's extremely beneficial to our listeners and our viewers, is really when you look at the concept of, $32,000 for the year, but you have, it's this Ivy League school-esque setup, but also your exchange program. So like you said, you're partnering with universities all over the world, but you're also partnering with Ivy League schools back in the US if a student wanted to do kind of a reverse abroad year, like our semester, and do it in reverse.
Yeah, we would love students to come for a full degree, but I'm just passionate about young people going out and experiencing the world. So if someone decides to do their degree from the US, another possibility is coming for a semester or an entire year as a study abroad and exchange student, and everything that they would study at Melbourne would count, to their degree back home. And yes, the reverse is true. If they came and did the entire degree from Melbourne, there is the possibility that they could come here to the United States, or go to top universities in UK and Asia, Latin America, you name it. So yeah, many opportunities for a global experience within Melbourne and around the world. I think, yeah, when you talk about diversity, we do attract students from over 100 countries. We're actually 44% international students, so you're going to be having a lot of other international students. Also, Australia is a country of immigrants. I think the research shows that half the country had at least one parent born overseas. So you're going to be mixing with a lot of interesting people from different backgrounds.
So, and we kind of touched on this too. I had a conversation with someone who was talking about a school in the UK, and two important things came out of it that you're kind of touching on. One was, I kept using the phrase fast track. Oh, I can fast track a 4-year degree in 3 years. And she said to me, no, we don't call it fast track. It's just a normal degree. It's 3 years. That's our standard. And I thought that was really cool. And then the other piece was, it's that whole concept of a global network. Now you're meeting people with, from all over the world coming to this university. They're in your class. You're learning about different cultures, different backgrounds, but not only on a personal level. Now you're also learning about their different culture as they apply to your particular degree program. Like, I know one of the things we talked about was like in architecture. You can learn about different architectures from different parts of the world, and it creates more of this broad range of experience and expertise that you can take anywhere when you go into the workforce.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you go abroad, you're actually learning a lot about yourself. You're getting new perspectives on your own country, how it's seen abroad, but then other cultures as well. Our academics are very diverse, that they're coming from around the world. So yes, when they're talking about the lessons, it's not just from an Australian perspective. They're going to be bringing the perspective, from different countries. And yeah, it makes for great eating, to having all these cultures represented in Melbourne. And then, yeah, having friends that you can call upon around the world. But these are also going to be your future colleagues and a great, network. We have a great alumni network to tap into as well.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think so. Let me ask you about that. So some of the things that that we look for from an informational standpoint are, okay, I've made this selection. I love the university. I'm gonna fly to Australia. I'm gonna live there. I'm gonna get my degree in 3 years. What does it look like from just preparation? Like I need a student, because our students may not know about any of the process. Like, how does it work with
Sure.
your calendar year? Because it's a little
Yeah,
different in like
right.
a student visa.
Well, first I'll talk about what we offer, and then the entry requirements and the application process. So at Melbourne, we have streamlined our degrees into 8 degrees, but within that, there's like 150 majors and minors. So there's pretty much something for everyone in terms of what you're interested to study. So we do admissions different in Australia in that it's very objective and very transparent. We are only going to be looking at your grades and test scores and meeting the prerequisites. We don't ask for personal statements or references. We don't look at extracurriculars. So the benefit is that if you have the required scores and prerequisites, you're going to be made an offer to the university. So the admissions criteria is based on type of high school qualification you have. Now, for most students here in the US, that would be a US high school diploma. And we're going to be looking at their GPA from their junior and senior years only, an SAT or an ACT score. And then we have academic prerequisites. Because our degrees are only 3 years, we want to make sure that you have a certain degree of knowledge and skills. And these are usually satisfied by AP exams. There are alternatives to satisfy some of those requirements. For anyone who's doing like an international baccalaureate, we also would base admissions on the IB overall score and having prerequisites. So those prerequisites and those scores do vary by degree. Sometimes it gets confusing because we have the same major across 2 or more degrees. It's the same major, but it's terms of like the core classes that you're having would be and would be different for each program. So if you then gain admissions, you're going to be issued a student visa, and that covers you for the entire length of your degree to come in and out of the country. And you can also work on your student visa. We wouldn't recommend, working no more than part-time. You have to study full-time as an international student. If you really like it in Australia and want to stay during the summer, which of course is between November and February, you could work full-time. So yeah, you could work on your student visa, and we can also help you through the process of, the whole application process, getting the student visa. But that's in a nutshell how we do admissions and for the University of Melbourne and Australia in general.
So in case anybody missed it, because I just caught it. So summertime is between November and February. Is that what you said?
Yes. So we follow the calendar year in our academic year. So students go up a grade or up a level with the new year. So the academic year actually starts late February, and then goes, you have exams in June. Then you have a 3-week winter break in July, and semester 2 starts in late July and goes to about mid-November. So you could be home in time for Thanksgiving if you want, or sometimes students are staying in Australia, or they're going off and having holidays in Vietnam. So in terms of coming from the United States, where you might be graduating in May or June, you'd have 2 options. One is you could apply to start in the mid-year intake, which would be a very short time frame, or you could start in the following academic year. We do orientation every semester, and we have the core classes every semester. So you're not disadvantaged being starting mid-year. in terms of when you apply, our deadlines will not make any sense to you from a US perspective. So I just advise students, if you're an international student, to apply when you're applying to US schools. It just means that you might be starting at a different time.
Sure.
Also, you can apply for the mid-year intake and say for July, but then you could, and deferrals are much more common in Australia. So then you can have like a mini gap year. The other caveat is if there's any Australians out there, we base your admissions on the same things, your test scores, GPA, but there's a different process and timeframes for overseas Australians. And there's a lot of Australians in the United States. So yeah, we have a different academic year, and the timing in terms of applications when you start can be a bit confusing.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, it's a little bit different just based on the calendar and the seasons, but
yep.
From what I'm hearing, it sounds like it's great. I do my normal process and procedure as a senior graduating. I get accepted. I might have a little time off before I start in February, which gives me time. But I'm also on a 3-year program, so I'm going to get my degree faster than I normally would in a 4-year program. And then I can always just summer and I come home for Christmas and then I go back.
That's it. That's exactly right.
I think I can live with that schedule. I'd be okay.
We do have graduate programs too. Yeah.
Yes. Well, so let's talk about that. So now I've gone through my undergraduate programs. I've got my degree. I'm looking to segue into the world, but there's a couple of things. One is you have additional graduate programs, but now let's say I go into the working world. You and I had talked about this previously. Your network of alumni are global, and you have 100,000 plus alum that are there to help facilitate through networking and or finding jobs. But really, it's a strong backbone of a team that's global. I mean, I don't know, what can you share on that?
Sure. So we have a program called Ask an Alumni. So you can meet up with an alum for a coffee in Melbourne, but it could also just be over Zoom. And we have, of course, international students who have gone back to their respective countries. Australians are out there in the world, so that's a great chance to network, to just get advice about future directions and to identify opportunities. In terms of when you finish your 3-year degree, if you study for at least 2 years in Australia, you are eligible to stay and work full-time in Australia for 2 years after graduation. You've got options in terms of where you want to pursue a global career, and having international work experience and contacts would be very attractive to future employers in the US or other countries. Coming back to the United States, if you want to go to graduate school, because our undergraduate degree is only 3 years, some US graduate schools don't see that as an equivalent of a 4-year degree. Most do, but you should do your homework if you have particular US graduate schools in mind. It's really not so much of an issue for employers. Employers just, when you have a bachelor's degree, tell me about your experience. And of course, you could stay and then do graduate school in Australia if you really like it. So you have lots of options, lots of networks, and lots of resources, for you.
Yeah, and then to kind of help our students and our parents that are listening, so you just hit on something like, hey, I'm looking to go back to the U.S. for a graduate program. Step one, do the research, because you have plenty of time to research and understand that if they accept the 3-year degree. But let's say they didn't. You actually have a game plan for that 1-year gap, right? There are things that students can do.
Absolutely, yes. So the degree is only 3 years. Honors in Australia is different. It's an optional 4th year of independent research. So it's almost like a mini PhD where you come up with a proposal and find an academic to supervise you. So this would meet the requirements for a 4-year degree. Also, for any students who are thinking about further studies, particularly research, it's also an excellent preparation in that regard. So yes, there are ways to meet the requirements to come back to the U.S. If they don't recognize the 3-year degree.
Sure. Todd, I have another question for you that this is closer to the mind of parents as much as it is students, but I know it's closer to the mind of parents. Let's talk about the financial part of this with scholarships and being able to pay for it. What do you have for info on that?
Sure. So again, as we talked about, the 3-year degree and the exchange works in people's favor in terms of significant savings. Scholarships in Australia are academic, or scholarships are only based on academic merit. There isn't a separate application, so they're already automatically considered. For a student coming from the US, they would need something like a 3.9 or a 4.0 and an SAT of like 31 and an ACT of almost like 1500. Also, the average scholarship award is usually only about 5 or 10,000 Australian dollars one time. So I think
Okay.
it's going to be limited in terms of what we offer in terms of scholarships. You can use your U.S. educational loans, student loans, parental loans at the University of Melbourne, as most Australian universities, so that can help finance the degree as well. Accommodation, we do things differently. 2 options are residential colleges and the halls or student apartments. So the colleges are a world of themselves. They have their own academic tutors, their own sports clubs, and it's your only option if you want a meal plan. The residential colleges offer their own scholarships for room and board, so that could be another source of scholarship or support. And then we also have, student apartments who have staff that organize social activities, but you have to do your own, meals as well. So that's also a little bit about just how financing works in Australia.
Sure. Todd, thank you so much for being on the show and sharing the information about the University of Melbourne. For people to reach out to you and contact you, we're going to put the website in the description below, but also you have a specific email that comes to the US team. Which email is that?
Yes, so we have a 2-person office based in California. So easiest way to contact us would be north-america@unimelb.edu.au. Don't forget the AU suffix on the N. You can also go to study.unimelb.edu.au. That you can start to peruse everything about it. We do have a page specifically for U.S. high school diploma, for IB, for overseas Australians. But if you get in contact with us or submit an inquiry through the website, that will also come to us, and we would love to connect. We also offer one-on-one consult to talk through all of the opportunities at the University of Melbourne.
Awesome. That's great. So for all the listeners and viewers, please visit the website. It's going to be in the description below, and also send an email to Todd and his team for North America team to get back to you and kind of step through what the process is and where you can learn more information. And then at any time, please visit springpath.net and see if the University of Melbourne is a match for you. Todd, thank you so much for being on the show. We appreciate it.
Great to be here. Thank you so much.
All right, take care.